Hello, everybody, and welcome to orderofthegoldendawn.com. My name is Martin Thibeault, and today I'm introducing you to a presentation which will be part of a long series of presentations on the tarot. These will be titled Golden Dawn Divinatory Tarot. This first presentation focuses on the tarot card of the Fool, also an unnumbered card, or card number 0, which is often placed at the beginning of the 22 trumps or at the very end, thus symbolizing the innocence and purity of the beginning of a certain stage, or even the completion and a return to the source, and the ending of a certain stage of development. While we could focus on the esoteric aspects of this card tremendously, the purpose of this series of presentations will be more on the divinatory meanings. And to deliver this first presentation, our speaker, our presenter, is a figure who's very well known in the Golden Dawn community. He is someone who's published over a dozen books on the Golden Dawn tradition, someone who has been initiated and working the Golden Dawn system for more than 40 years. In fact, he's one of the last remaining adepti who was initiated by adepti of the Old Order through its faction, the Stella Matutina, which later became known as the Smaragdom Talasis in New Zealand. He is also someone who's a close friend of mine, who's been a mentor and an initiator for me on my 22 years journey in the Golden Dawn system. He's been there for about 15 of those years. He's someone whom I have tremendous respect for, whose knowledge extends so far beyond just about everyone that I've ever encountered in the Golden Dawn system and tradition. And he's someone who's definitely more than qualified to deliver some very interesting insights today on the full card in its divinatory context. So I present to you Mr. Pat Zalewski.
Hi, my name is Pat Zalewski, and I'd like to talk to you about the GD Tarot. Now, this particular series of lectures that I will be doing on video, or on the net basically, is an extension of the areas I never covered in the book that I co-authored called The Magical Tarot of the Golden Dawn. Quite a thick piece of work that we actually cut down before publishing. But what I plan to do is look at the tarot for the divinatory aspect of the tarot. Now, this is more or less devoid of all the associations and analogies that you've actually got in the Magical Tarot of the Golden Dawn. But I wanted to look at the divination aspect purely from the divinatory viewpoints. While you can't completely ignore the esoteric aspects of the tarot, you certainly can restrict it to a certain extent and make it work for you. Just to give you a little bit of background, I started professional tarot reading in 1988. I took a redundancy package in my government job, and I worked as a tarot reader professionally during a very intense period from 88 till about 94 or 95. And during that period I was averaging about 70 tarot readings a week. Well, that's we worked it out that by the time we finished at the local market where we were working, my ex and I had probably done about over 20,000 tarot readings each, and I've still continued on to this day, and that was that's almost 20 years ago. So the number of tarot readings I've done is probably in excess of nearly 40,000 over that period of time. Seems a lot, but that's what happened. What I found was that when I looked at the meanings of some of the Golden Dawn tarots, they were very restricted. They didn't cater for purposes of divination. You didn't look at the viewpoint of it from divination much at all, other than brief meanings. And yet a lot of people use the tarot. I've used the tarot myself. I use it daily. The readings that I did were professional readings. They weren't just for myself. If you add the readings that I've done for myself over the years, it would be quite a lot more. So I bring this up to show you that I've been through it. I know what it's like to do it from a divinatory viewpoint, and this is the area that's sadly lacking in the Golden Dawn. I won't be getting too much onto the tarot keys. Not the tarot keys, the actual varying spreads, because anyone can pick a book up and have a look at that. But I use a very baseline approach. But what I would like to do is discuss the tarot keys in different astrological houses. Now, that's one of the things that we pioneered back in the early 80s. Now, Uh, I have no doubt that someone else has done it before us, but that's what we originally did. And we put that out in we really worked at it. And but we found that using the astrological houses, we had to make some adjustments because the astrology was actually a more linked with the individual self, where in tarot you've got to cater for somebody else coming in or something else. You've got to cater for that, encapsulate it and wrap it up and explain what that means. So the astrological houses were modified to a certain extent so that we could get more out of it in a more easier format. The whole idea was that the meanings of the cards were greatly increased by the divinatory aspect of the tarot. And although I'd done tarot readings for many years before that, from an esoteric viewpoint, nothing really prepared me for that 70 readings a week, and it was a sink or swim situation. The reason I did that was I wanted to see if I could cut as a writer, and so that more or less paid my way. I had the house paid off at that point, and I just got stuck into it, and it was like it was a real pressure valve situation. You had to succeed or you didn't, but it did give me most of the week off, and to write the books that I've now written that some of you may have on your shelves at present. So that's how I initially started, and all of that includes the ritual commentary books as well. That was all 5 different books and put together in a single book and heavily edited to bring it down more to something more usable. So that was the reason why. So tarot reading was probably the only job I've really loved. It was a tremendous experience. Divinatory tarot within the Golden Dawn brings out a tremendous amount opens up the faculties in the psychic faculties like you wouldn't believe. It brings in states of awareness. It helps you focus more, and it tends to hone your magical skills in other areas as well. So I think it's fairly essential that it should be done and looked at. But it was never done that much. I only gave some brief meetings in the Magical Tarot of the Golden Dawn for divination. They were accurate, but they were extremely brief still. Now I want to sort of amplify this a little bit. The problem you've got with the Golden Dawn Tarot is that when you look at the Golden Dawn Tarot deck, it was never completed. And when you look at the tarot papers, you've got Mathers giving you meanings for cards that haven't even been drawn up yet. If you doubt that he didn't draw the cards up, all you've got to have a look at is the AO65 ritual, which really tells you that things weren't as stable as they were. He did these papers probably about 88, and he got the Tao Chan was introduced in the mid 1890s. He probably got them from a series of other works and put them together and thought, okay, we'll use those particular areas. But I doubt that Mathers would have done anywhere near the readings that I've actually done myself, and a number of you out there would have done many, many more than what he did. So we had a chance to put all this theory to the test and just see how it goes. I think the papers were probably done, even the Golden Dawn came out 88. I'm pretty sure that it's just a hunch that I think Mathers would have done them before the inner order was available. So he had to prepare that. So he would have been writing after he did the rituals. He would have been writing on the tarot well and truly before that. Would have taken a year or two at least. That's why I place it back that before the inner order of around about 1890. So these things have to be cut and dried in place. But when you do tarot cards that were that have no imagery or anything to it, and you just put a meaning out, well, that's bloody ridiculous. You can't judge a card that way. Remember, he never quite finished those cards. He started to look at them in the THAM grade, but never quite. When you look at the some of the lectures in there, produce aspects of the tarot, and the AO65 do, but they really don't tell you. It's nowhere like the earlier lectures. You can see that he was struggling, to be honest. When Falcon entered the picture, he completed the tarot deck, but he put his own stamp on it in the higher levels. And it's the Falcon deck that we're actually going to be looking at the moment today. Now, this tarot deck for divination purposes is really, even though it's a straightforward divinatory aspect, it's really not for the beginner. This is really for the experienced Golden Dawn practitioner who wants to use the tarot cards and wants to get more out of them. Now, I see my function is to show you what I've done, and you build on it or take away from it, whatever you wish. That's the job that we got to do. It's not done in temples. It's left to their own resources. We just can't have that anymore. the divinatory aspect of the Golden Dawn Tarot is such a vast area that we're going to have to devote a number of lectures towards it. So when we start to work at this, we have to look at it in a fairly complete manner. This will go over the course of quite a number of lectures. Each lecture will be on one card through various elements of the house. And I'd like to start with the Fool card. Now, the Fool card in the Golden Dawn deck differs drastically from the Weight deck and the Boater deck and numerous other decks. You've still got the Wolf in there, as you've got some decks, but what you've actually got here is a wolf under control. I've mentioned before, I don't want to get too much into the esoteric side of it. I want to look at the divinatory aspect. Well, there's a lot of ways to look at what we're going to do over this particular course, and the first one is we're going to look at the astrology aspect. We'll bring that as a guide or an undercurrent. I won't dwell on it too much, but I'll look at it to a certain area. Then the second factor is going to be the image of the card itself, what that's going to mean, and the third factor is what does it mean. Now, we're using the astrological houses, and one of the first houses you've got is the first house, which basically we've referred that to self-awareness. Now, I've allocated a modification to these houses to make it a little bit more easy to understand from standard astrology, but if you want to use the standard astrological houses, it's quite easy to make the adjustment. The first one is when you receive this card in the first house, you look at the direction of the movement. Now, what sort of movement is it for the Fool? Well, the Fool means that it's a bit like the quality of air. We've got air and Uranus as the higher and lower forms of that. That's the baseline of astrology, and that's what I think Mathers originally worked through when he tried to build up the meanings of the actual cards. Now, when you get to the Fool as a card, when you look at the divinatory meanings, you've got something that direction of movement is spasmodic. It's like I mentioned in the book, it was a divine child, but what you've actually got here is erratic movement. You've got someone who's got a game plan. He's working with the elements around him to a certain extent, but the people around him don't understand what the hell he's doing. It's a bit like the scientist who can't remember where he put his shoes. That's the Fool. The job gets done, but it gets done not to the rhythm or the pattern of people around them, but to the individual who does it. Now, if you get this in the first house, you'll see it's the direction of movement. What's he going to do? Well, he's going to be spasmodic. He's going to get imparts of genius coming through to see what's in the other side of it. But also, he's going to act on impulse. That's another thing that comes through, and that's a very, very strong one. When you act on impulse, that's a whole aspect of things. You get this with following through in the various other areas, but that's part of the directional move. So you're not going to get a smooth flow. You're not going to get a flow that's going to be stopped. You're going to get a staccato pattern that's a bit like a lightning flash. It goes up and down like a yo-yo to a certain extent. So there's very, very little baseline as far as an even Steven situation goes. So when you're divining this particular card and you're looking at it, you look at the direction of movement. What does it mean in general? We're looking at the abstract concept of it. Well, it means a spasmodic movement. It means someone in their surroundings which appear off with other people. The Fool is right at the center of it. So you have someone coming towards you. It's a situation that really, for short-term ventures, it may not appear to last. It's short-term gains, but it's a situation that is it's not sluggish in its movement. It's lightning fast and stopping, but it gives us this staccato approach. Now, that's the general direction in the first part of the first house. Now, look at you look at the second phase in the house. You look at the response to others. Now, the response to others in the Fool means that you can't rely on this person. There's no doubt about that, because the person's got his mind on other things. There's no reliable there because he understands the greater plan of what other people do. He's thinking of other things and trying to do too much. So the Fool will respond to you in a great gush of whatever you're particularly after, what particular area. The gush will be there. He'll suddenly come on like gangbusters, basically. Next minute you won't see the person. That's the attitude or response to other people. He'll come in, he'll look at one thing, and he'll disappear. There's no real staying power there to the level that you want, but to the level of the Fool, it's different. So there's an unreliability factor coming through there when you look at the response to other people. You cannot rely on him, but could you talk to this person, you would get good insights out of him. So that's the response. So it's a matter of talking to the person, going away and getting what you can out of it. Now, One of the interesting things about the Fool is the reaction to, still in the first house, looking at the reaction to environmental factors. The environmental factors around the Fool means he's at one with his surroundings. That's very, very important, because when you see the Fool being at ease, you see everyone else around them not knowing quite what they're doing, or working to their plan, he's working to another. So the environmental factors, the Fool fits in quite well. So what you've got to do is marry that position of the Fool and the environment, and make sure that when you get a particular card, depending on which way it goes, or what the surrounding juxtaposition of the other cards are, is a situation that he reacts to his environment by being in tune with it. So he will be in tune with other people and in his environmental aspects. So people will, for a short-term basis, think he's always on track, he's just like one of us. In the long term, they'll see that he'll go off and he's greater than what you actually see. So when you look at all these aspects combined, that's just in the first house of the Fool, it goes a little bit further than what one people would normally look at. Now, we come to the second house, which is basically material possessions. Now, how does a Fool deal with wealth? Well, the Fool doesn't. It's pretty plain and obvious. The Fool doesn't deal with wealth. He spend money as fast as he can get it. He make money very, very quickly and lose it again. That doesn't mean it's negative, and this is the problem you got with the Fool. It's not a negative situation at all. Now, remember, the Mathers situation and a lot of the esoterics, the Mathers situation of the Golden Dawn relates the Fool to air, and relates to in case did, and also Mrs. Falcon in later papers, she related the elemental cars to Uranus. So you've got air and Uranus. Now, air and Uranus as a baseline, remember, it's an undercurrent. It's not a major factor. It's not the factor. It's a netting factor, but it's also not the primary function of it. And Mathers tried to make this by looking at the astrological function and tried to make it. But the image of the card too, that comes into it. When you get the divine child myth, it gives you a thinking mechanism of someone surrounding their environment, and he's reaching for more than what he can do. So this is someone who's willing to take a chance, someone who's willing to take a long shot if you want to, and will succeed in the long shot to a certain extent, but they're limited to how far they can go by taking that chance and that long shot. So there's a certain amount of success if the situation is limited. If it's an open-ended situation, the Fool certainly won't go too far on that. So you're really looking at a situation here where wealth can be accumulated, it can be looked at, it can be taken in, but you won't keep it. Now, how does the Fool accomplish this? Well, the Fool is brilliant in areas. They'll be unconventional. They'll come at it right out of left field when you least expect it. That's where the Fool does well. This is where the air faculty comes in. It's definitely the intellect is being used, but it's more than that. It's almost like an understanding of the ethers to a certain extent of, I'm going to go over there, I know this is going to work, and they get in tune and actually do it. Now, the thing comes into the Fool, okay, you've got wealth, what does the Fool do with it? Well, the Fool spends it and gets rid of it. While the Fool's got long shots of actually making money, the Fool's got long shots of actually losing it again as well. So that's the other element. I would add to this that the Golden Dawn never used reverse cards. They looked at some meanings that were a little bit negative to a certain extent to try and get a better balance, but they never used a reverse card. So we're not using reverse cards here. And I think, frankly, in all my years of tarot reading, I think reverse cards are too cut and dried. They're a mistake. You've got to let your intuition work for you as such. Alright, now we go to the third house, consciousness and how you deal with it. Well, the Fool was entitled, we've entitled it in the Magical Tarot of the Golden Dawn book as the awakening process. Now, the awakening process shows brilliance and flashes coming through. That's what the Fool is. There's no doubt about that. But the Fool also has his own structure. Now, this is not looked at. When before we've talked about impulse, you think the person just goes off and does it. Well, there's flashes of brilliance, but there's a method in the madness, and that point should be definitely overstated. It's been understated up to this particular point. But the Fool's got some sort of a creative structure. They work to it. You probably won't understand what the Fool does. It's like looking at someone in a divinatory meeting. Why is he doing that? What are his motives? Has he looking at this, looking at that? Will he fit in here? Will he fit in there? You won't really guess it. If you're trying to figure out what makes the Fools tick, you won't succeed in a general basis. The person's too spasmodic. They're not really unreliable. They're just good for short-term ventures. They're specialists. If you want them for a certain specialist thing, that's how you do it. Now, the Fool understands what he wants to do, and you put the Fool in certain situations, and they'll gain from it. But as I said before, they won't stay. Now, we talk about the brilliance of the fool, so we're looking at the connectiveness with others on metaphysical thought. This is where the fool thrives. This is where the structures of the previous, just of a minute or two ago, come through. The fool is good at bringing analogies in, seeing the structure, looking at the pros and cons of it, and transcending to another level. That's the metaphysical aspect. The fool sees behind the veil. Most people will look at the veil, the fool will see behind it. So you've got all these elements coming through. On a day-to-day level, you've got someone who will discuss certain aspirational contents with them, what they should do, what they shouldn't do, and there'll be a lot of sense in there. But the fool will never follow it through himself. That's up to the other people around them, as such, to see how it goes.